What's going on, everyone? This is Damien Michael here. Y'all can call me Coach D with the Shift Method. Hope all of you are having a wonderful day. I just want to say thank you for tuning into my very first YouTube video outside of the podcast that I do. Really looking forward to producing some awesome, exciting, engaging content for all of you. And today we're going to be talking about the barbell back squat. Kind of the ins and outs, like the basic setup, what does it look like? Why do we do it? Maybe some differences between certain styles of squat, like high bar versus low bar, as well as going over some of the basic mistakes that you might see, either as yourself or if you're a coach, what you might see in your client. And then, of course, I'm going to go over how we can set up the squat, make sure you feel comfortable setting it up for yourself or someone that you're training, and then make sure that we're all good to go there. So let's get into it. So, some basic cues for the squat, which I'll go over again once we get over to the bar, but there's really some main principles that we want to focus on. First is placement of the bar. Now I know there's going to be differences between high and low bar, and we're not going to go over too much of that here today, but basically a good rule of thumb is you want the bar resting tightly on your traps. Mainly the top of them, but again, if you're doing low bar, it might be a little bit lower, but you have the bar nice and secure on your upper back. The next thing is you want to make sure that your knees track over your toes, right? We don't want to be caving in too much. We don't want to be going outward too much. We want to make sure the knees are relatively in line with the toes. Some exceptions to that for some particular athletes. We also want to make sure that our feet are relatively flat on the floor. So usually we talk about the tripod foot. That's going to be the heel, the pinky toe, and the big toe. We want to make sure that all three of those are making contact with the floor the entire time so we can produce the most force. In terms of the bar, when you're watching from the side how it looks, you want to make sure that the bar is relatively over your midfoot the entire time. For most people, that's going to be the knot on your shoelaces, so that way it's over the middle of your foot. And again, this is really good for force production, being able to put as much energy into the ground as possible to make your squat as strong and as efficient as possible. In terms of muscles work during the squat, of course, this is primarily a lower body exercise, emphasizing the quadriceps muscles. But we do work other things that are kind of accessory or assistance-based muscles, like the hamstrings, the glutes, the calves, the adductors and abductors, and we also get a little bit of the upper body as well because we are doing a back squat. Your spinal erectors need to stay upright, your traps are keeping your shoulders back and down along with your lats, and of course you're also working those deep abdominal muscles when you're bracing and exerting force to stay controlled through the bottom and then producing force through the top. So really it's an entire body exercise. All right, so now I'm going to show y'all how we do the setup for the squat, getting the bar and everything set up. So let's come over here. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you have the J hooks, or where the barbell is going to go, at a good height for you. A general rule of thumb is you want to have it roughly about shoulder height or right where your collarbones are. That way you don't have to tiptoe your way out of the rack. So I'm going to set that up first. Okay, so like I said, want to make sure that it is roughly about shoulder or collarbone height. And always remember, because each squat rack is a little bit different in terms of the increments of height, it's always better to have it a little bit shorter than a little taller. So if you find yourself, you're like, man, I feel like I'm half squatting out of the rack, or I have to tiptoe out of the rack, go with the half squat. Especially when you start getting heavy, whether it's yourself or a client, you're going to get tired at the end of a set, and you don't want to have someone try to exert extra effort to tiptoe into a rack. That's just a recipe for disaster. Better to squat it out than to tiptoe it back in. Next thing we're going to set up is we're going to set up the safeties. So again, spotters aside, right, kind of a different conversation, but main thing when we're talking about safeties or the catch is we want to make sure that we set it up just below the range of motion that you're going to do. So to kind of get an idea, you can do a couple of reps and see kind of where the bar lands and make sure that you have those just below. So in case you fail, you'll be able to catch yourself, get from under the rack, and be able to kind of just take the plates off and reset. For me, this is actually a pretty good height, and again, each one's a little bit different, but generally you'll have to twist it out, and then you'll want to make sure that you lock it into place. All right, so you don't have to use these. These are lifting shoes. For me personally, just with my biomechanics and my form, these work a lot better. These are the Traffic Cone 7s. They work really, really well with me. But no, I just personally like using them. Helps me get a little bit deeper in my squat and keep my form really, really good. So I'm gonna get these on first, and then we're gonna get right into it. Roma Leo 2s, for anyone who's wondering, one of my favorite workout shoes when it comes to Olympic lifting or powerlifting. These things are phenomenal. I've had these things for 4 years now. They're amazing. No issues with them whatsoever. All right, so next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go through a couple of reps of the squat. Of course, remember, as you're going through the squat, if you're ever uncomfortable with the weight, always err on the side of caution of doing something that pushes you but that you're capable of. If you got your safeties in place, you'll be fine. But don't be afraid to ask someone for a spot if you are challenging yourself for that day. Now, let's go over how we set up the bar on our back and how we actually walk it out to prepare for our squat. I like to do what's called a 3-step method. So the first thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna get the bar rested on your upper traps. Again, high bar versus low bar side. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna pull it nice and tight, almost like you're doing a lat pull down, and then you're gonna take 3 steps back and shimmy your feet into position. So let me show you how that looks. So as you see, I got the bar nice and tight on my back. I got my feet out in 3 steps, and then I put my feet in the position that I want. All right, so again, I'm gonna show you the position of the bar on your back, as well as how we're going to walk out to make sure that we get in a good position for our squat. So again, making sure your hands are equidistant from the middle. You can use the knurling on the bar to get a good gauge for that. Gonna get underneath. Get that bar nice and tight on your upper traps. Again, you're not resting it on your neck, right on the top of your back, standing up, and 3 steps out. 1, 2, 3, and then adjust your feet to get in the position that you want. And then when you're done, always remember that you want to walk in kind of the same way you came out. You never want to lean into the squat rack. You always want to take a few steps in, get the bar all the way in, and then gently set it down. And the last thing that we really got to talk about before we actually go and do some reps is your feet position. So this is going to vary greatly from person to person, your anatomy, what feels most comfortable for you. Generally, if you have longer legs, you're probably going to want a little bit of a wider stance, as well as maybe turning your toes out slightly. Or some people might feel more comfortable with a more narrow stance with toes pointing straight ahead. You're just going to play with it a little bit. A good rule of thumb to start is just at or just outside shoulder width, and turn your toes out about 10 to 30 degrees. Get some good external rotation. Get your glutes involved a little bit. And that's it. What you saw is that basically I'm trying my best to get just past parallel, meaning the crease of my hips is just below my knee. If you can't get that low, that is okay. Do your best to get as low as you can, as long as you stay with those cues I told you. Back is tight, keeping that bar stable on your back. Knees track in line with the toes. And of course, making sure that your knees don't cave in too much going in or out as well. And your foot staying flat on the floor. Some common mistakes that I see in the squat, the main ones that I notice as myself or working with the client, is you're going to see the heels come off the floor. So people's feet, instead of being flat on the ground, they kind of lean forward too much and their heel comes up. I always tell my coaches that I train or that I work with that always try a cue first before going into like a technique correction. Meaning some people just need to hear what they're doing wrong first and they might fix it. So a common cue for that could be, hey, make sure you're keeping your heel down in the squat, or sit back in your heels a little bit more, maybe like you're sitting in a chair. Although the squat isn't really sitting in a chair, sometimes that cue sticks with people and it works for them. Another common mistake is if you see people's knees kind of caving in on them or going too far out, I usually use a similar cue of just saying, hey, knees in line with toes. Knees tracking the second and third toe, and usually that helps people kind of understand where they need to position their knees in relation to their feet. The other main mistake I'll see is that if I have excess rounding or arching, a little bit is okay. The spine is going to naturally flex and extend in a compound lift. That is fine. But if it's so much so where it's kind of egregious, where I have people kind of like this, or the excessive lumbar extension, what I'm gonna do is tell them, hey, keep a flat back, right? And sometimes the biggest thing, or the biggest cue that's gonna help that is telling them, hey, just keep the bar tight on your back. That usually cleans up most of those errors that I see. And that's it, everyone. That's kind of the ins and outs of how to do a barbell back squat. Of course, as I mentioned, there's a lot of other nuances associated with it, like the bar position, other cues, and of course, programming for it. But that should cover the basics for yourself, or if you're working with a client. As always, I really appreciate y'all. I'm looking forward to producing more content for you. Hopefully getting a video every other week, releasing on Mondays. We'll see how that goes. And of course, if you like this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Would greatly appreciate any of the support that y'all can give. And I'll see y'all in the next one. See ya.